What is the craziest weirdest thing you have done to avoid facing your fear? I hate the dentist. I don't know where this fear, hatred and loathing came from, but from a young age I hated it. The smell in the place. The instruments. Anyway, so I knew I had a dentist appointment, so 10-year-old me got out of bed at 5 AM. Put on all the camo clothes I owned. Fassa paint. Camo netting. The works. Went out into the garden and hid in a bush. Appointment was at 10 AM, so I thought if I stayed there till midday I would have missed it and no chance of being squeezed in late. Eventually people start shouting in the garden for me and looking around. My dad was about a foot from my face but didn't see me. Went in at 12 o'clock crying. Mum asked me why the hell I hid in the garden. I said because we had the dentist at 10 AM. No love, that's tomorrow. As a toddler I would always wake up in the middle of the night and see ghosts in the hallway. I have no idea what these were. But I still remember seeing these short, slender, opaque, white figures moving around the hallway. Weird as hell. Anyway, I was freaked out. My solution? Climb out of bed. Run past the ghosts down the stairs. Through the kitchen. And into the living room where I would hide under the coffee table and call for my parents for an indiscriminate amount of time. This happened a lot. I was afraid of alligators under my bed and I thought they were allergic to milk. So one night I dumped the entire gallon of milk under my bed. The next morning my room smelled like gorilla tea. Edit. Spell check edit 2. Thank you for the gold. I'm so terrified of public speaking that in college I would do anything in my power to avoid it. On the first day of every semester, I would read through every syllabus to check if there would be a presentation. If there was, I would spend hours calculating what the highest possible grade would be if I took a 0 for the assignment. Then I would work extra hard on all the other assignments and exams so I could still pass without giving a presentation. This method worked. And I graduated with honors and never gave one speech. I don't do ladders. But I'm also really an L about how my house looks. So when a large branch fell on the roof, the only way I could think to get it down was to duct tape 2 rakes together, end to end, and try to get it with that. It didn't work. Probably gave the neighbors a laugh. The branch is still up there. 4 teeth drilled and filled with no numbing or anything. I don't like needles. I'm not going to say I have a diagnosed phobia. But if I saw a professional and they said I had needle phobia, I wouldn't be surprised. I hated needles and anything to do with them. I was at the doctor's and needed to get my blood drawn. My younger sister went first, but I decided I wasn't gonna do it. So I hid behind a trash can. I was 16. When I was 16 I had to get a TB test to volunteer at a hospital. It's a needle and it makes your skin pucker up a little bit in a circle. I had a full-on crying meltdown, completely hyperventilating for over 20 minutes. After I finally went through with it, the nurse says, well, at least we know you'll never do drugs. I didn't eat for 6 days to avoid going to the store one time. I'm agoraphobic. What did the agoraphobe say to the other agoraphobe? Nothing. They are in different houses. I'm afraid of statues. I left Santa Fe a day early because I either couldn't handle all the public art. I walked around a corner into a 15-foot tall Aztec warrior and almost had a panic attack. Stay inside and avoid social situations even though it kicks my depression into high gear. Traveled for almost a week where I had to drive 1000 kms and had to take 6 ferries to avoid 2 flights. Browse Reddit to avoid my life. Climbed out of my bathroom window in nothing but a towel to avoid the spider hovering above the door. When I was little, I used to pay my brother with candy for him to lead me to our bedroom or the bathroom in the dark. Because I couldn't go through the corridor by myself if it was at night, you had to get to the middle in order to switch a light on. He also had to come get me if I wanted to go anywhere else from there. I have an eating disorder. I walked 5 miles home in the freezing rain to avoid getting home early and risking eating more that day. This sounds so stupid, but I am genuinely horrified of the old school ventriloquist dolls. I blame Goosebumps. I started seeing a guy, and when I went to his house the first time he had one in his room, I ran and made him put it upstairs. He didn't realize this was a genuine phobia and thought I just found them creepy. So later on he started chasing me with the doll and I was crying. His roomie realized that I was in full panic and got in the guy's face while I hyperventilated in the corner. He said he thought I was laughing instead of crying, and spent forever apologizing to me while I took shots of whiskey to calm the FCK down. I was pretty young and afraid of monsters, but I had woken up really early, 3 to 4 am, and had to pee. So I wrapped myself in my comforter and moved at a snail's pace out of my bed and towards the bathroom. By the time I opened the bathroom door it was light out. Kids at those ages are pretty bad at telling time, but I would guess that it took me about 2 hours to move 25 feet. Okay. So I get grossed out by dirty plastic. Like old toys or plastic mannequins. Like, looking at them makes me gag and I have to look away. No idea where it came from, but it's visceral. So like 8th grade gym, everyone in my school has to do mandatory CPR training, with the final being verification by UG. Performing CPR on a dummy makes me sick just to think about. I was mortified, and I just knew that if I put my lips on that thing I would just vomit. The day before the final I pulled my teacher aside and begged her to let me do it with anything else. Brought a stuffed monkey plush and said I would perform CPR on it, and bless her f***ing eternal soul, she let me do it. I dodged a huge bullet and instead lay in a room alone with my teacher while she watched me give CPR to a plush monkey. Can't imagine how bizarre that moment must have been for her. But bless her for respecting my weird phobia. Knew something was wrong with me. Avoided the doctors for 3 years because I feared having my blood drawn. Bought a bladder buddy. I was in the army and drove around field officers as a lowly PFC. Had a urinary tract infection from drinking the tap water in Korea, and I guess soju. You used a condom catheter and clipped the bag to your leg. No one ever noticed it, but it felt weird having all that stuff in my uniform. Never once peed in it. Just having it there gave me an option if it ever felt like I was going to piss my pants. Helped calm me down a lot on our weekly drives to Seoul and Incheon Airport. Skipped school for 3 weeks straight in middle school to avoid playing hot cross buns on recorder in front of my music class. The teacher still made me play it in front of the class. Crying. I had the fear of darkness, and to cure it, I stayed in the darkness for 2 hours straight. Congrats, Bane. I have a fear of mirrors, especially in the dark. It's pretty mild now, but when I was younger, if there was a mirror in the room where I was sleeping, I would find any possible position to sleep in that would let me avoid any potential eye contact with the mirror. The number of times I woke up with stiff neck or muscle cramps from odd positions. Run out of a doctor's appointment naked. I absolutely hate needles. When I was a kid, my mom took me to the doctor promising no shots this trip. The doctor comes in and says hello and all that. He has his back turned to me and I can see him fiddling with something, so I ask, "Is that a needle?" And he turns around with a goddamn needle. So I scream bloody murder, jump off the table, and run to the door. As soon as I opened the door I realize I'm in my underwear and stop. That's when my mom and the doctor caught me and eventually held me still enough to stick me while I'm screaming and crying. When we left, all the kids in the waiting room were bawling crying. I've driven to people's houses to hang out before, only to turn back once I reached the driveway because I feared socializing and presenting myself. Especially if I see a second car in the drive, because it means there are even more people. Ah well. A girl I know was so afraid of a terrorism attack in her train that she took the bus instead. It made an hour commute into a 3-hour commute. In her mind the bus was safer because there were less people on it and also less immigrants with beards. Edit. Some further info. This was a daily event for close to a year. ever since the Brussels airport attacks. And it made it so she had to travel 6 hours a day. Somewhat claustrophobic. I took the train to school every day in London. Rush hour is hell on earth for me. I always got a newspaper and stood next to the door window when going to school to try and take my mind off the cluster of people around me. After school, most people who went home in same direction as me that I'm friends with went in the middle of the train. I always went to the very end of the train. At about 3:45 it ain't busy and the rear of said train is usually mostly empty. So to avoid the crowd, claustrophobia, I always went to the rear. I must have looked like the most antisocial jit on the planet. But I just can't stand in a crowded train if there are empty options everywhere else. I tried it every now and then to see if I was any better. But nah. I just panicked in my head and got off early and took an alternative route every time, even if it was half an hour longer. I have a phobia of needles. I cannot get myself to get over it. I have done so many things about it but I still want to die whenever I have to get a shot or get blood work. Some things that I have done in response to needles. Stopped taking all my medication that made me have to get blood work every 3 months. I have bipolar. This was no bueno. Ran out of the office and away from the nurse who was going to take my blood. Had to get coaxed back in by my mom. Tried to get over my fear by forcing myself to watch videos of people getting blood work done. Don't do this. Pretended to pass out at doctor's office so I wouldn't have to get blood work. It didn't work. Also kind of hurt. I've given up vacations. Tickets to games and otherwise good times because I'm fking terrified of driving over big bridges. I live in South Jersey. I miss out on a lot. Okay, I had a deathly fear of emails in college. I didn't check my email for 4 years and would just show up in person to do things or contact people. Basically my thought process was, I should check my email. But I might have important emails. Major panic attack. Don't check email. That cycle went on for 4 years. Probably really mentally unhealthy. But I forced myself to check it when I applied for jobs. Because I had to. No going to their office. If anyone thinks this is not recent. Like email was new. Nah, it was a year or 2 ago. I'm afraid of dinosaurs. And have vivid nightmares about them. One time I had my co-workers check the stairwell at work. It was an office building downtown in a mid-sized city. We were in the middle of the building. Not the top or bottom floors, to make sure they were clear. I got a lot of crap from them about it. But the peace of mind was wonderful. Also, I'm getting better. And I'm not as afraid these days. Like, you're afraid that a real dinosaur is going to get you Jurassic Park style? I'm not making fun. Those raptors were scary moffus. As I was leaving my house one morning I turned around and saw the biggest spider on my stairs. It was so big at first I thought I dropped my black earphones. Ugh, it was horrendous. I knew there was no way I could deal with it or go back into the house after getting home from work if I thought it was still there. Or worse if it had moved. So I stood at the end of my drive and asked every person who walked past if they'd come into my house and get it. Eventually some bin men came and got it. I got a rag stuck on a pipe which I needed. So my friend gave me a ladder to go get it. What he didn't know is I was afraid of heights, so instead of climbing the ladder I used the ladder like a stick to try to swing the rag down from the pipe. Was your friend, by any chance, taking a video of this and cheering you on? I was terrified of getting my wisdom teeth removed, so once my mom and I arrived at the dentist and got out of the car I bolted and ran a few blocks till I got on a bus and went to my buddy's house to smoke weed. That's a terrible idea. 1. Medications expire. 2. You should always take your full schedule of antibiotics. So you should never have extras laying around. 3. You should never take medication prescribed to anyone else. So you should never have their extras. 4. Do you want an antibiotic resistant bacterial infection? That's how you get an antibiotic resistant bacterial infection. I'm terrified of snakes, but I actively go out and search for them in the wild to photograph observe. So much so that I consider myself an amateur herpetologist and carry a homemade hook for handling them. To this day I haven't encountered any that I've been able to capture, and it terrifies me to think what I would do when I do finally get one. All I'd want to do is hold it and manipulate it for photos.